Welcome to the Selective Traffic Enforcement Grant overview. This video will guide you through the ground rules, requirements, and application process. By the end of this training, you'll be able to find all the relevant forms, including instructions on the Basecamp site, recall the agency commitments for grant recipients, enter required information into appropriate areas of the grant form, and submit the completed grant application. Also, for more in-depth information about grant requirements, please see the Grant Requirements and Objectives form, which you can find on the Highway Safety Grants Network Basecamp website. Selective Traffic Enforcement Grants, also known as Highway Safety Grants, are available to law enforcement agencies throughout the state to provide for enhanced or overtime traffic enforcement activities. This strategy is a proven countermeasure for reducing traffic injuries and deaths, and these grants are designed to target safety priorities both locally and statewide. Priorities of the grant include occupant protection, such as increasing seatbelt and child restraint usage, decreasing impaired driving, and reducing speed-related crashes. The Highway Safety Grant is event-based with a specific traffic enforcement focus. Applying agencies can select calendar or local events based on their needs and priorities. It's a good idea to select these events at the beginning of the project to allow for better planning of activities and more effective media placement. Each agency has a set amount of grant funds available for high visibility, occupant protection, and alcohol enforcement. You can find the complete funding formula in the Files section of the Basecamp website. Only uniformed officers in patrol vehicles whose expressed purpose is overtime traffic enforcement are eligible for reimbursement. Foot, bicycle, and security patrols are not allowable charges. Also, only officers at a rank of sergeant or below are eligible for reimbursement unless otherwise assigned by the agency head. The reimbursement your agency receives for officers involved in grant-related enforcement is based on each officer's overtime pay plus allocated benefits. You must include the details for computing the overtime rate and benefits on your department's reimbursement form. If other enforcement duties interfere while officers are working traffic enforcement overtime, grant coverage will be suspended and should be noted in the comments section of the Officer's Daily Activity Report. Grant funds can be used to purchase radar units, in-car video cameras, and related accessories to enhance the effectiveness of traffic enforcement activities. If your agency receives equipment funding, it must participate in the Selective Traffic Enforcement Grant Program for 2 additional fiscal years. Failure to do so will result in the agency being required to refund the reimbursement for the purchased equipment. Equipment invoices need to be submitted by June 1st of the current fiscal year, and all items should be ordered by December 31st of the grant fiscal year. Your reimbursement will be processed after the equipment is received. Purchase of radar units will be reimbursed at 100% with a maximum reimbursement cost of $3,000 per unit. These units should be purchased from the conforming products list, which is available on the Basecamp website. In-car video cameras are reimbursed at 90% of the total unit cost, with a maximum reimbursement of $4,410 per unit. Due to the limited funding available for the purchase of cameras, a separate narrative describing the need for camera purchases must be submitted. You will also need to submit information about the number of cameras your department currently owns. Please note that the purchasing of body cameras is not an allowable expense. While more detailed information can be found in the Grant Requirements and Objectives Form HS2, this is just a reminder. Unallowable expenses include reimbursement of vehicle operating costs, foot, bicycle, or security patrols, and body cameras. Agencies that receive grants agree to several commitments. These include using the law enforcement best practices found in the NHTSA's publication, Countermeasures That Work, and willingness to comply with the regulations set forth in the Federal Rules and Regulations section of the Highway Safety Act. Also, the agency's current seatbelt policy should be posted on the agency's project management site. If a policy hasn't been developed, project staff will be able to assist you. Grant recipients must participate in the following 3 national events: December and holiday enforcement, which targets DUI, May mobilization, which targets occupant protection, and the August national crackdown, which focuses again on DUI enforcement. These events and other events should be effectively planned and executed, and required reporting forms must be submitted at the conclusion of each event. These forms include the Officer Daily Activity Report signed by the officer, Event Activity Summary Report, Equipment Forms, and Reimbursement Voucher. All forms are available on the Basecamp website. Forms should be submitted within 45 days after the conclusion of an event. The agency will be sent a reminder request for the required forms. However, if the appropriate forms aren't submitted within 60 days after the conclusion of an event, the agency may not be reimbursed for that event, and the agency's future grant eligibility may be jeopardized. Also, please note that due to federal requirements, all forms for events worked in September must be submitted by October 10th of the current fiscal year without exception, or the agency will not be reimbursed. After the forms have been signed by the project director to certify hours worked and activities performed, the completed form should be submitted by email or fax, and copies of the form should be retained by the grant project director for 3 full fiscal years. Grant application forms can be downloaded from the Basecamp site. The forms in the grant application packet are located in the File section of the site in the Grant Documents category. The forms in the packet include Department allocations for Alcohol Overtime Enforcement Grant funding, Department allocations for Occupant Protection and High Visibility Overtime Enforcement Grant funding, the HS1 Grant Application Form, which is similar to the application form used last fiscal year. This is used to apply for grant funds that have been specifically allocated for your agency. Finally, the HS2 Grant Requirements and Objectives document, which provides detailed information about the grant requirements and the agency commitments and objectives. Please review it carefully to determine whether your agency is willing to abide by all the requirements for grant recipients. Make sure you completely fill out the required forms to avoid delays in processing your application. To begin, fill in your agency's budget found on the department allocation sheets. Now, select the national events that your agency is requesting grant funding for and fill in the dollar amounts needed for each event to be worked. Remember, agencies are required to work the holidays, May mobilization, and national crackdown in order to be eligible for any grant funding. Select the local events that your agency is requesting funding for and fill in the dollar amount that your agency will need to work each local event. Be sure to provide the name of the event, the dates involved, and the safety focus, as this will affect your funding source totals. Total the dollar amount that you're requesting for all local and national events. If this amount's greater than your department overtime enforcement budget, you'll need to complete the additional funding request section. For this section, subtract your department's overtime enforcement budget from your total funding request for DUI and occupant protection high visibility activities. You must provide a written narrative summary and attach it to your application for the events or problem you're requesting additional funding for. Be sure to include relevant information to justify your request, such as crash data. Your request for additional funding will be evaluated and authorized by the Traffic Safety Committee based on unallocated funding, performance and use of overtime in your previous grant, and the merit of your request. Refer to the Additional Funding Request Guide for more information. Finally, if you're going to be requesting funding to purchase in-car video cameras or radar equipment, you'll be asked to provide the number of units your agency currently owns, the number of units you're requesting, and the total price for the requested units. You will also be required to submit a separate narrative that provides additional information justifying your request. Make sure you provide the names of the authorizing official or agency administrator, as well as the assigned project director. Upload your Excel application form to your agency project management site. The staff of the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police Highway Safety Grants Program will review the submitted grant application form, check for completeness and conformity with grant requirements. WSCOP's Traffic Safety Committee will then meet to review all grant applications and will award grant funds in accordance with funds available within the Wyoming Department of Transportation's Highway Safety Plan. If your grant application is selected, a preliminary agency award notification letter for agency budgeting purposes will be uploaded to the agency's project management site. You'll then receive a Grant Agreement Form, HS3, which must be verified by the agency administrators. Each grant agreement must have the project director's signature and also the authorizing signature on the grant. If the two signatures are the same, it is still required to have both signature areas completed. The agency will then fax or email the signed grant agreement to the grants program staff. Program staff will sign and upload the finalized grant agreement on the agency's project site. This completes the grant application and authorization process.